A hush fell over the packed courtroom as Special Prosecutor Ella Sharp entered through the heavy wooden doors. She had taken on countless corruption cases before, but today felt different. The stakes were astronomical. An entire city administration stood on trial for fraud. And the presiding judge, Damian Holloway, had a reputation for being both mercurial and ruthless. As Ella settled at the prosecution's table, she felt a slight twinge of anticipation. Across the aisle, the defense team, led by a charismatic attorney named Vincent Roth, made a show of arranging their expensive suits and polished briefcases. Their client was none other than Deputy Mayor Carlton Graves, a figure revered in local politics until a massive accounting scandal rocked City Hall. Ella cleared her throat and glanced at the row of reporters scribbling furiously on notepads. This was not going to be an ordinary day in court. Judge Holloway arrived precisely on time. In one swift motion, he took his seat behind the towering oak bench. His presence demanded attention, silver hair, stern gaze, and an unmistakable air of authority. Ella had heard countless rumors that Holloway's sharp commentary could fluster even the steadiest attorneys. She thought she was prepared, but the moment his cold, gray eyes landed on her, she sensed an undercurrent she had never felt before. "All rise," the bailiff's voice thundered. Everyone stood. Holloway raised a hand to motion for them to sit. He wasted no time diving in. "Ms. Sharp," he said, tone dripping with condescension, "I trust that you've decided not to bore us with endless spreadsheets today?" A whisper of surprise spread through the gallery. Ella took a calm breath. "Your Honor, I have substantial evidence related to the systematic misappropriation of public funds. I assure you it won't be a bore. Merely the facts." Judge Holloway gave a thin smile. "Let's hope so. I have little patience for theatrics." Ella exchanged a glance with her co-counsel, a quiet but astute lawyer named Alden Cole. They had meticulously prepared for everything: the defense's rebuttals, the city's tangled paper trail, and the judge's rumored hostility. However, hearing Holloway's dismissive tone firsthand was a jarring reality check. Vincent Roth strolled up to the defense table, exuding confidence. "Your Honor, we plan to demonstrate that Ms. Sharp's allegations are not only unfounded but stem from a personal vendetta." His voice was warm, cultured, and almost soothing. Ella steeled herself. "Your Honor, the defense would like to paint this as personal. But my office has documented evidence, including financial ledgers, emails, and sworn testimonies, all pointing to a network of corruption led by Deputy Mayor Graves." Holloway leaned back, tapping a pen against his desk. "Ms. Sharp," he said, "I'll give you a chance to present your so-called smoking gun. But I warn you, do not waste this court's time." The judge's stare was piercing, and Ella felt each word like a small jab. The courtroom fell silent. Ella approached the projector screen, methodically placing the first exhibit, a series of wire transfers from the city's public relations fund to private accounts allegedly linked to Graves. Yet before she could begin her explanation, Judge Holloway raised a hand to stop her. "Ms. Sharp, is there a reason you're burying us under documentation?" His voice was laced with a biting sarcasm. "Perhaps you could summarize these spreadsheets before we all nod off." Some in the gallery snickered, but Ella refused to let it rattle her. "These numbers, Your Honor, show direct overlaps between city accounts and private beneficiaries. The money was then funneled into multiple shell companies. More than a dozen such entities are tied back to Mr. Graves and his associates. Holloway gave a dismissive wave. Fascinating. Let's see if you can be concise. We have a busy docket, though it appears you'd prefer to dominate today's agenda. Ella felt her stomach tighten. But she pressed on. She displayed screenshots of internal memos where Graves actively approved unaccounted budget increases. Each memo had Holloway's electronic signature sign-off to confirm that the documents were indeed legitimate for the court. As she outlined the details, Holloway's gaze grew unnervingly intense. He tapped his pen against a stack of papers. Ms. Sharp. Let me ask you this, isn't it true that city departments often have overlapping budgets? Are you grasping at straws to inflate a simple procedural flaw into a scandal? Ella took a moment to collect herself. Your Honor. It's not just a matter of overlapping budgets. This money disappeared entirely from public records before reappearing in Mr. Graves' affiliated accounts. Roth seized the moment, adjusting his tie and stepping forward. Judge Holloway. We'll show that Ms. Sharp is misguided. These accounts were for legitimate development projects. Her entire narrative of corruption is just that, a narrative. The tension in the courtroom mounted. Ella clicked through more slides. Consultant fees doubled. Then tripled without justification. Infrastructure projects billed twice. Funds mysteriously withdrawn in the wee hours of the morning. Each piece painted an increasingly damning picture. Ella turned to address the judge again. Your Honor. You can see from this timestamped transaction that the monies were withdrawn almost immediately after a newly revised contract was signed. The contract included your sign-off. Hold it. Holloway interjected, bristling. Are you implying I had a hand in this fiasco? The judge's expression hardened. She refused to retreat. I'm not implying anything, Your Honor. Contracts show your signature. Some individuals may have used your name or authority without your knowledge. That remains a question for this court to examine thoroughly. Holloway's nostrils flared. And a silence, thick as fog, spread over the room. Ms. Sharp. Choose your words carefully. It was then that something in Holloway's demeanor changed. The tension at his brow, the tightness in his jaw had hinted at deeper involvement than Ella had initially suspected. She felt a flurry of unease flicker through her. Was the judge personally complicit in this scheme? Vincent Roth cleared his throat. Your Honor. This is crossing a line. Ms. Sharp is using innuendo and half-formed evidence to malign the integrity of the court. Might I ask that she refrain from casting unwarranted aspersions? Ella took a steadying breath. I have no desire to cast aspersions, Mr. Roth. I simply want every signature, every directive, and every financial statement to be scrutinized. The public deserves no less. Holloway leaned forward, knuckles white as they gripped the bench. This had better not be a witch hunt. Ms. Sharp. He seethed. I show no mercy to overzealous prosecutors. She stepped back to her table, exchanging a glance with Alden Cole. Alden quietly slid a new folder toward her, marked confidential. It contained data Ella had only recently received, records so incriminating she hadn't dared mention them until the right moment. On the other side of the room, Grace watched with apparent disinterest. He looked bored, even slightly amused. as though confident that the judge's impatience would eventually shut down the prosecution's arguments. But he hadn't seen what Ella possessed in that folder. Bailiff John Parsons, standing stoically at the side, seemed to sense the crackling energy in the air. He straightened his stance, eyes darting from the judge to the defense table, then over to Ella. Finally, Ella approached the bench, holding the folder. "Your Honor, I have documents to submit into evidence." Before she could continue, Holloway shoved his glasses up the bridge of his nose and glared. "You'll submit nothing until I rule on its admissibility," he snapped. "Now, what in the world do you have that demands further disruption of these proceedings?" Ella held his piercing stare. "Communications logs between city officials and outside consultants, logs that show a pattern of intimidation and instructions to falsify records." She lifted the corner of the folder, revealing a small portion of an email chain. "They suggest a thorough cover-up." A ripple of gasps spread through the gallery. Even Roth's usually unshakable composure faltered. "Your Honor, these so-called logs are likely tampered with. We demand a full review." Holloway banged his gavel once. "Order. I will examine these behind closed doors. Court is recessed for 15 minutes. Ella blinked, surprised by the abrupt recess. She exchanged a curious look with Alden. Something strange was unfolding in that courtroom, and she suspected the judge intended to control whatever revelations might come next. During the break, Ella slipped into a quiet corner near the hallway. She dialed a secure line to speak with her lead investigator. "Miriam. It's me," she whispered. "This evidence is about to come under the judge's personal review. We need to ensure all copies remain unaltered." Miriam's voice crackled on the other end. "I've got backups with timestamps. We're good. But be careful. Our intel suggests certain city officials are desperate. They won't back down easily." Ella hung up, feeling the weight of her own caution. There was no telling how deep the corruption ran. She glanced down the corridor and noticed Judge Holloway stepping into his chambers. His expression was grim, more so than usual. When the recess ended, Holloway returned, solemn-faced. He resumed his seat, but before anyone could speak, he motioned for Ella to approach. "Miss Sharp," he said, voice low, "I suggest you reconsider offering these logs into evidence. They could be construed as invasive, possibly illegal." A shocked hush enveloped the courtroom. Ella's heart hammered. "Your Honor, these logs were obtained through valid subpoenas. We followed every legal protocol." She glanced at Alden, who nodded in quiet affirmation. Holloway's lips tightened. "Nevertheless, I find them inadmissible. You may not present them to the court at this time." Murmurs of confusion rippled among the jury and spectators. Ella heard a couple of reporters in the back shuffle in their seats, readying their pens for the next big twist. Vincent Roth seized the opportunity. "In that case, Your Honor, we move for immediate dismissal of these claims. Without these so-called logs, the prosecution lacks substantial evidence." Ella could hardly believe what was happening. "This is a profound piece of the case, Your Honor." He raised a hand, silencing her. "I have spoken." With each word, that undercurrent of tension between them grew stronger. Stepping back to the prosecution table, Ella's mind churned. This wasn't a mere difference of opinion, Judge Holloway was actively blocking crucial evidence. Why? She suspected an ulterior motive. Alden leaned over. Is it possible the judge is compromised? He whispered. Ella exhaled. We have to consider it. She flipped through her files, scanning for another approach. If he wants to stonewall us, we'll have to reveal something even more damning. She pulled out an unmarked USB drive. Inside were audio recordings intercepted legally via a whistleblower's help exposing behind-the-scenes threats made by city officials. Ella had intended to introduce them later, but now urgency demanded immediate action. She stood, addressing Holloway directly. Your Honor, though you've deemed the logs inadmissible, I have alternate evidence. I request to play a recorded exchange for the court, illustrating the severity of the corruption. Holloway stiffened. Any more surprises? Ms. Sharp? Ella inserted the USB into the courtroom's media system. A flurry of static offered a brief delay. Then a voice rang out, if the prosecutor gets close to the real numbers, we'll have to bury it, do you understand? Use the judge. Use the board. I don't care. Just keep it locked down. The voice was distinct enough to cause a stir in the gallery. Cries of disbelief rippled among the reporters. Even the jury leaned forward, straining to catch every syllable. Judge Holloway's face darkened. Ms. Sharp. Cut that off. But Ella allowed the clip to finish. Another voice responded on the recording, the judge is on our side. We'll make sure none of this sees the light of day. Silence followed, weighted and immense. Ella stared at Holloway, whose expression betrayed a flicker of fear. Your Honor, I must ask, whose voice was that on the recording? She said, her voice echoing through the quiet chamber. A cold knot formed in the pit of Ella's stomach. She recognized the second speaker. And from the crowd's reaction, so did others. It was unmistakably Judge Holloway. Vincent Roth shot to his feet. Objection. This is entrapment. Your Honor. This evidence is unverified. Possibly edited. And Holloway's cheeks burned red. He fumbled with a stack of papers on his bench, refusing to meet Ella's gaze. Silence. There will be order in my courtroom. But the reaction was uncontrollable. Gasps. Shocked whispers. Even a few pointed stares directed at Holloway. The once fearsome judge appeared cornered. He slammed the gavel once, but the echo felt hollow. Ella moved back to her seat, her voice vibrating with an odd calm. Your Honor, that recording appears to implicate you in attempts to suppress evidence. Care to respond? For a heartbeat. Holloway did not speak. Then he cleared his throat. Ms. Sharp, you're making serious allegations. We'll settle this in chambers. Bailiff. Take that recording out of the system. The bailiff looked uncertain, glancing from the judge to Ella, then to the defense. Ella stood again, shaking off her own tremors. Your Honor, you don't get to simply remove evidence from public record when it incriminates yourself. I believe we must consider recusal. At minimum. Holloway's gavel came down with a thunderous crack. Enough. Ms. Sharp. You are being held in contempt for disrespecting this court with these unsubstantiated attacks. A wave of alarm surged through the room. Reporters leapt to their feet, cameras clicking and pens scribbling. Ella's gaze swept across the jury. Shock was etched into their faces. She knew threatening the prosecutor was a desperate move. But she also knew it indicated the severity of Holloway's predicament. A moment later, the judge's next words rang coldly, "Bailiff. Place Ms. Sharp in custody for contempt." Ella felt her heart slam in her chest. She glanced at Alden, who looked utterly appalled. But she didn't back down. "Your Honor, you have no grounds for this. I have the right to present evidence." Two officers approached, caution in their eyes. They hesitated. No one wanted to arrest a well-respected prosecutor in such a public, chaotic moment. But Holloway's furious glare offered them no choice. As hands closed around Ella's arms, she turned to address the courtroom. "Hear this. Everyone, we have proof of a conspiracy. I won't be silenced. The judge himself is." "Get her out of here," Holloway roared, spittle forming at the corners of his mouth. The officers guided Ella toward the side exit, cameras flashing behind her. A flurry of excited voices rose, covering every inch of the courtroom in a static-like hum. For a moment, it seemed that the judge's authoritarian command would carry the day. But then Alden Cole stood, clearing his throat with a determined set to his jaw. "Your Honor, if you remove Ms. Sharp without cause, you risk a mistrial and you risk exposing yourself to perjury charges should the state choose to investigate those recordings." Holloway shot him a furious stare. "You have no authority here, counselor. Sit down or join her in contempt." Alden held his ground, adjusting his glasses. "I respect this court. But I'd also remind you that prosecutors aren't above the law. Nor is the judge tasked with presiding fairly. The evidence stands. And Ms. Sharp did nothing wrong by introducing it." The tension was razor-sharp. The officers paused, unsure whether to continue escorting Ella out. She, meanwhile, stood quietly between them, unwavering. The entire room waited for what would happen next. Finally, a new voice emerged. "Judge Holloway. A moment. Please." All eyes turned to see the head of the district's Judicial Review Board stepping into the courtroom with a small entourage. She was an older woman, with a commanding presence that somehow dwarfed even Holloway's. No one had expected her arrival. Ella's breath caught. If the Judicial Review Board had come in person, that meant immediate oversight. The timing was remarkable. Someone must have alerted them to the meltdown in progress. Judge Holloway shifted, an unmistakable flicker of panic crossing his face. "What is this?" he demanded. "I'm in the middle of a hearing." The woman's gaze was stern. "So we see. We've received disturbing reports about your conduct, Judge Holloway. We're here to observe. And if necessary, intervene." A stunned hush spread across the gallery. Even the defense table looked rattled. Graves, the deputy mayor, seemed more anxious than he had been all day, drumming his fingers against the table in a restless pattern. Vincent Roth's confidence seeped away, replaced by raw uncertainty. Holloway swallowed hard. "I welcome observation, but not interference. This is my courtroom." The board official took a step closer. "Legally, it's the people's courtroom. If it appears that you're obstructing justice, we have the power to suspend your authority." Ella felt a sudden surge of hope. The officers at her side relaxed their grip slightly. The atmosphere shifted. Some silent current of accountability had stepped onto the stage. Holloway pressed his lips into a thin line. He glanced at the board official. Then at Ella. And finally at the gallery full of watchful eyes. Fine. We will proceed. Ms. Sharp. You may remain. But I will not tolerate any more recklessness. Understood? Ella nodded, controlling the urge to protest that she hadn't been reckless, but instead determined. The officer stepped away, letting her stand on her own. It was a small, yet significant victory. Alden let out a discreet sigh of relief. Then he whispered, "We need to use this moment to our advantage. Let's see if we can fully present the recordings." Ella agreed. She turned to the board official. "Thank you for intervening, ma'am. With your permission, I'd like to continue introducing evidence relevant to the city's corruption scandal. It includes potential malfeasance by multiple public officials. The recordings directly implicate Judge Holloway in stalling the investigation." The official inclined her head gravely. "Proceed. Ms. Sharp." Ella retrieved the USB drive again, her earlier confidence returning. She signaled the technician at the AV station to cue up a new clip. The speakers crackled. And soon the entire courtroom was listening to a phone call between Holloway and Graves. Holloway's voice, "Make sure Ms. Sharp's motions are never approved. I'll toss them out whenever I see them. She's too close." Graves' voice, "Understood. I've already arranged for crucial documents to be missing. This will blow over." A collective shiver seemed to run through the room. Some members of the jury visibly tensed, while reporters scribbled notes in frantic strokes. If there had been any doubt about Holloway's direct involvement, that doubt had been obliterated. With great effort, Holloway managed a laugh strained and hollow. "These are misleading snippets, taken out of context. I will not stand for tabloid sensationalism." But now, the Judicial Review Board official stepped forward, her jaw set. "We will decide if it's misleading, Judge." The tension was so thick it could have been cut with a knife. Graves rose from his seat, clearly agitated. "Your Honor," he said softly, then switched to a more urgent tone. "Judge Holloway, we need to end this hearing immediately." "We can't." But it was too late. The board official turned to the defense table. "Mr. Graves, I advise you to sit. We have grounds to suspect your involvement in systematic corruption. You're on trial for misuse of public funds. Now, you'll also face charges of collusion with a sitting judge." Beads of sweat lined Graves' forehead. His lawyer, Vincent Roth, looked every bit as shaken, searching for a lifeline in the swirl of allegations. "May I request a moment to consult my client?" Roth asked, voice trembling. Judge Holloway licked his lips, searching for a way out. "We'll take another recess." But the official from the board shook her head. "No, Your Honor. The time for recess is over. We must proceed transparently." At the prosecution's table, Ella locked eyes with Alden. She spoke in a hushed tone. "This is bigger than we realized. They were orchestrating everything behind the scenes." Alden nodded. "We should move for immediate suspension of Holloway's authority. We can't have him presiding when he's implicated." Ella rose to address the board official directly. "Ma'am, I move to have Judge Holloway recused from further involvement in this case pending a formal investigation. It's clear his role is compromised. A flicker of triumph crossed Ella's face, though she maintained her composure. She turned to the bailiff, who seemed relieved to have an official directive at last. "Bailiff," the official commanded, "please escort Judge Holloway to a secure area. He will be temporarily detained for questioning." Holloway shot up. "You have no right." But the bailiff stepped forward, joined by a second officer. Their posture was firm, indicating they were prepared to follow through. The entire courtroom watched, transfixed, as Judge Damian Holloway, once the stern gatekeeper of justice, found himself on the receiving end of official restraint. Reporters surged to the front aisle, snapping photographs and calling out questions. Holloway's face flushed a deep crimson, a mixture of fury and fear playing across his features. He struggled for an imposing retort, but the words fell flat against the unstoppable tide of accountability. Finally, the bailiff said the words no one ever expected to be directed at a figure so powerful. "Judge Holloway, you are being temporarily held pending further investigation for conspiracy to obstruct justice and abuse of judicial power. You have the right to remain silent." A hush blanketed the spectators as Holloway stiffened. His gavel slipped from his hand, clattering onto the floor, echoing hollowly. The Judicial Review Board official turned her gaze on the defense table next. "Now, Mr. Graves. As for you." The deputy mayor swallowed hard, glancing at Roth. Together, they seemed to realize their final line of protection had just been stripped away. "I would like to cooperate," Graves stammered, hands shaking. Vincent Roth attempted to remain stoic. "Please note, we're prepared to enter negotiations. My client is willing to disclose all relevant details for a more lenient sentencing." Ella immediately caught on to the shift. She approached with cautious determination. "If you're prepared to cooperate, you should speak now, Mr. Graves. The people of this city deserve the truth about how their funds were siphoned off. But be warned, cooperation doesn't guarantee immunity." Graves nodded, voice trembling. I understand." There was a network of silent partners. Judge Holloway was one of them. "We had deals lined up through shell companies. And in exchange, certain motions got tossed, and budgets were inflated. Some of it reached the mayor's office." Ella exchanged a quick glance with Alden. This was bigger than they had imagined. If the mayor's office was also implicated, the entire structure of local governance was tainted. The gravity of that realization pressed into Ella's chest. The board official took a measured breath, as though absorbing the magnitude of what she was hearing. "In light of these revelations, we will initiate a comprehensive inquiry. For now, Mr. Graves, you will remain in custody under suspicion of grand corruption. Ms. Sharp's case against you stands." Graves sank into his chair, his bravado gone. Roth slid a hand across his brow, looking thoroughly defeated. They'd lost their judicial pillar, and with it went any hope for a quiet acquittal. Ella moved to gather her files, feeling a mixture of relief and lingering dread. The city's corruption was deeper than one judge and one official. She knew the days ahead would be filled with sifting through mountains of evidence, depositions, appeals, and who knew what else. But for the moment, justice had gained a foothold. Outside the courtroom, the halls buzzed with commotion. Journalists jostled for statements, cameras flashed incessantly. Ella stood by the door, maintaining a steady facade as she addressed the press. Today, we witnessed something extraordinary. She began, her voice calm but resolute. The unraveling of a conspiracy at the highest levels of our local government, and the accountability of a judge who was meant to protect the law. Let this serve as a reminder to everyone that no one, absolutely no one, is above the law. A reporter raised a microphone. Ms. Sharp, can you confirm that more arrests are expected? Ella paused, measuring her words. The evidence is ongoing, and we will pursue every lead. I cannot comment on specific targets until we're certain. But I can tell you the investigation won't stop here. As she spoke, her eyes flicked to the corridor where Judge Holloway was being led away in handcuffs, his parted lips forming silent protests. In a surreal twist of fate, the guardian of the gavel had been reduced to a suspect in his own courtroom. After the press dispersed, Ella finally allowed herself a moment of reflection. Alden Cole appeared beside her. We did what we had to do, he said softly. It's not every day you bring down a corrupt administration and a complicit judge. She nodded, her thoughts swirling. The city deserved the truth. Now it's out in the open, and there's no turning back. Together, they walked toward the exit, passing the once intimidating double doors of the courtroom. Voices echoed behind them as officers, officials, and reporters swarmed the site of perhaps the largest scandal in the city's memory. Ella inhaled the cool air as they stepped outside. The sun was already beginning to set, painting the sky a vivid orange. In that brief, glimmering moment, she realized they had only chipped away at the surface of corruption. But it was the start, a resounding statement that even in a city steeped in darkness, justice could still cast a bright light.